So what I've done is I've sped this up 400%. It's a 2-hour sculpt, and we're just going to look at it. It's using all the same techniques that I've shown in the other videos. So basically I start out simply by forming a masked off part of the body using the move tool. I'm now pushing and pulling some fenders into place. Using the transform tool, I kind of tweaked out the back corner. It seemed like it was diving in a bit, so now just squishing things around with the move tool, making sure things make sense. And once I have the basic proportions all set up, I decided it was time to begin to cut up this object using the groups, the polygroups. I guess before doing that, just looking at changing some of the form using the clay tubes brush and smoothing it back out. Using the polish brush to tighten edges. I thought, what about looking at maybe some other forms that might be happening in the front fender or the front bumper areas and the rear bumper areas. Just smoothing those off, just trying to find some shape that I like. Okay, at this point, it's time to begin to cut the wheels in. I needed to remember to turn off my subdivisions, so kill my subdivisions. I like using double loops around the wheels. What's nice about that is it makes it so that it's smoother. You have a smoother transition when you end up putting loops in. So I've gone ahead and taped together or merged all the excess pieces on the top of this body. And now I'm just trying to find some different shapes that I think feel interesting to me. I wanted to put a little bit of an air intake up front, or actually in the side. I was just trying to find a shape that would look nice with that. I'm just cutting the different pieces up. When I finally get them all cut up, we'll start to tape it all together, but essentially, things were moving along pretty well right here. Decided that the lasso was a little hard, and so I began to use the curve occasionally here. Particularly the curve is pretty nice for cutting things up that need to be parallel, like this A-pillar. And then I decided I didn't like that kind of a canopy, so I completely went back and scrubbed back in my undo history and pulled it apart and decided to go for more of a cockpit look. So at this point I'm just trying to mirror across. Occasionally when you mirror, you've got the wrong axis, so you need to go down to the deformation tab, mirror, and then go up to the geometry, mirror, and weld. Now that I've got all these pieces, just looking at a few more little sections that could be useful. So finding a shape here, and then we'll need to go ahead and mirror and weld one more time. So and in this case tape a couple pieces together again. Okay, mirror, and then mirror and weld. And now the vehicle is ready. So just to test things out, use the polish by groups with the donut, just to kind of check and see how that flattens. And now I'm clicking on group loops, and I'm noticing I've got a couple little funny bumps. What's happened there is when you use the group loops or the panel loops, occasionally you will end up with small holes. And so once I did that, I went back up to geometry and clicked the fill hole button. They're different groups. They need to be fixed eventually, but all those little bumps on the skin are basically problems with filling holes. So I filled those. Eventually, I believe I go in and clean them up and attach them to different groups. But for right now, I just wanted to get it moving. So I thought the most important feature of this vehicle was those this air intake right there on the sidewall, the door panel. So I've got to put those pieces in first, and then just start looking at what parts and pieces could be basically pushed around and shaved. And so going back to the high polish brush to put a little bit of a feature line in the sidewall here, I thought I'd see what kind of forms we could pull out of this shape. I'm noticing I still have a couple little holes up front that will need to be fixed. Actually, what it is it's a different group and it's masked kind of funny, so it took me a bit of time to clean this out, but in the end all I had to do was make them all the same group and then smooth it out. There we go. All that work, all fixed now. And now when I smooth it out, it will barely be noticeable, if at all. There are other ways to fix those. I could replace it with a different surface, but this is a sketch model. So select everything here, and I do like to select using the Shift and Control click on a polygroup, make it invisible and mask it, then invert the selection. It seems to be a couple extra steps, but I like to see what I'm getting while I work. When I use the tool, the masking tool under the brush, where you can brush mask by polygroup, it's great, except for that sometimes I don't feel like I have exactly all the same control if I want to smooth something across the center line or smooth something over the top of an edge or a feature or a polygroup. Okay, so I'm just kind of experimenting a little bit, looking for what pieces will look nice, kind of clamshelled in. And occasionally I have to go back, Shift and Control, and change my selection settings from Slice to Select Rec. Okay. Here I decided I wanted a little more detail, another tail lamp. And so I've just gone through, selected that middle poly group, and added another group using the lasso tool. And then when I click on the Polish by Features as a dot, it just aligns the edges so they're nice and clean without destroying the shape. So now I'm just kind of cleaning up some of these holes. Feeling pretty happy with the basic shape. I think I lost a little bit of that feature edge, so kind of cleaning that back up, putting it back on. And noticing that from the front view, when this is all hollowed out, it looks really awkward. It just looks like there's no space coming off behind that wheel well. So I filled that back in using the clay brush and smoothing it back out. And now just trying to find, I just want a little more shape in that front hood, and kind of struggling to find it until eventually I decided, well, let's just raise the ridges instead of trying to push everything down, which is what I was doing. Eventually I'll go back and kind of clean up that edge. Okay, so here what we're getting is I decided to put a new edge loop in rather than use the panel or the group loops, which would be a mess now that I've already got a number of other objects there. I've simply selected that group and used the edge loop with a displacement distance of a negative value, which allowed me to kind of push in that shape and get a couple loops in there. And I'm just kind of playing around looking for a little more feature. Okay, just kind of checking a little bit of everything. Trying to decide if I'm ready for cut lines or not yet. And I'm not. There's a few little minor things to change and to look at. So now I'm getting ready for the cut lines by mixing and merging areas. So I've decided if I want to do a cut line through this, I'm going to have to split it up in interesting ways. And the best way to do it is to basically connect as many pieces as possible. I'll be using the panel loops to make the cut lines. And I'm just trying to get a nice, interesting and nice headlamp. And I finally gave up using the cut and just decided to use a mask and then convert that to a group. Going to the deformations, letting that round itself off, and then coming back out and doing some slicing. Once again, kind of struggling with how to get a nice tail lamp. And in the end, because of, I guess, speed and wanting to get done with this, I chose to do a shape that in the end I'm not super happy with, but it's not that huge of a deal. I could always go back. I've got my history. I could go back and clean that out and come up with some other options, which is great. As I'm working on a project, I can always go back and redo things. In this case, here we go. I'm just going to clean up this window, make a cut line for that. I might need to go fix a couple of things, tape a couple of polygroups together, and then I can go to my panel groups, the panel loops, change the setting of the door cut lines, make it a little more round, and make sure I've got the size looking about the right size that I'd want it. I tend to check these by using the BPR and check and see what a render looks like and see if it still looks good. It can be kind of hard to see if those edges are about the right size, but this in this case looks pretty good. And now I'm just kind of going through and materializing things, changing things from regular silver to darker and lighter values, giving myself some red. So I guess technically the vehicle is almost done, although pretty soon I'm going to start embellishing the details and adding some extra things like mirrors. But right now I just wanted to continue to play with it, get the vehicle ready for a render. So I'm just assigning materials. You assign materials, I don't know that I covered this, by selecting any object, so it's the only thing visible or the only thing that is not masked. And if I've got the mRGB selected at the top of the page, and then I go to Color, Fill Object, that will actually fill the object with the material, the M, and the RGB for the color. And that's what's going to allow me to basically just materialize this vehicle quickly. Now I place some wheels in, I'm just changing their size and shape, and in this case moving with my move brush things around. Generally, I probably would have my wheels in a little bit earlier than this, make sure that my wheel wells all match, but it is a sketch model. So raise that up, incline it just a little bit, make it a little bit more aggressive. It feels to me like it's the size of an Alfa Romeo, and just trying to make that feel right. Okay, it's starting to look pretty good.